Paula answered and said, "Mr. Ferguson wants a word with you." "I trusted you. You told Sunderland about the way we were going to line up."
As we talk, Manchester City have lost 5 games in a row, and there's crumbling and sudden disintegration, and you don't come back from that.
But before that, he glided Messi-like past. In fact, even he's a bit more upright than Messi.
Hi gang, on the Joy of Football podcast this week, Martin and I start with Overland and Sea as we remember great trips.
And then we have some subjects we definitely need to talk about.
Letter from the Gantry is commentators finding out the teams before they're announced.
And 3 of the best, young, old, and the player. We've got our views again.
Comparisons. Right back to Manchester City goalkeepers of Everton and creative midfielders from Aston Villa.
And we have some stoppage time as well, which I think you will find interesting.
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks like Xavi! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello. The Joy of Football podcast returns after the international break. Well, we didn't go away during the international break, but we're here without fatigue because, in my case, I just miss club football and cannot stand international football. Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, loves all football.
Yes. Hello, everybody.
We're going to start today with a light appetizer before getting into the main course. The next segment, we need to talk about England, Tuchel, Carsley, Manchester City. But we're going to start with Over Land and Sea, where we recall some of our travels abroad following football. Mm-hmm. Martin?
Well, this is quite a short journey over land, but it was quite dramatic. Italia 90, round of 16, and I was working for the first time for an Australian channel at the World Cup, SBS. I just left ITV, and they said, look, we need you to do a lot because we're a small station, and I think of the 52 games, I did 39 of them, obviously not all of them, a small percentage, maybe 10 or 11 from the grounds. Anyway, the round of 16, the Republic of Ireland were playing, Jack Charlton's Republic of Ireland were playing Romania in Genoa, and I think it was a 5 o'clock kickoff. I guess that's Italian time. And so I was to do the game, and then the sweetener really for not being sat in a booth all the time was to go to the games when I could. And the second game on that day was Italy in Rome, where we were based, against Uruguay. So the carrot was, well, you get the Republic game, we do that, as you've been doing off tube, and then we'll get you down. It was like, I think, a 9 o'clock kickoff in the Olympic Stadium. So I did the set-off of the Republic of Ireland game, and then it went to extra time, and then it went to penalties, confirmed. It was great result for the Republic. Confirmed by David O'Leary's winning penalty. Now, I came out of the booth with my notes under my arm for the second game to be told, look, we're not sure with the traffic we can get you there. And I went, that was sort of disappointing. So we have got an alternative. One of our young runners makes the coffee and everything, has got a scooter of the old Vespa Lambretta type. Do you fancy going on the back of that? And I went, yeah, I want to get to the game. So he was called Francesco, And so Francesco wheels me out. As I walked out, I walked past Greg Dyke, who was a very influential man in British television and worked for the FA, of course, as well. And he went, where are you going? I said, I'm going on. He just looked at me as if I was balmy. I don't think I'd have been going on a scooter under his watch if I'd been working for him. But we had have a good evening and all that. So I got on the back, and I don't think then anyway you had to wear a helmet. But I wasn't too happy about going off with somebody into the Italian traffic. So I got a helmet. So they gave me a helmet. So off we went. It was fine. Time was okay. And then there's viaducts and sort of like Spaghetti Junction bits around on the way from the International Broadcast Centre, where I'd done the first game in Rome, to the stadium. And we get up onto one of these Spaghetti Junction flyovers, and it runs out of fuel. So now I'm betwixt and between. I can't go back and do it off the monitor as I could have been if I hadn't gone to the game. I would have been sitting in the same booth with a different match in front of my screen. So anyway, he said, "Oh no." He said, so he walks into the middle of this. It's like 3 or 4 lanes, and sees the first bike that comes and flags him down. And obviously, speaking Italian, he basically said that this fella's got to get to the game. Are you going to the game? Can you take him? And it was, yeah. So I get on the back of it. I can't even remember what it was, but it wasn't a scooter. It wasn't very substantial, should we say. And I've got my helmet on. So off we go. And bless him, the guy took me there. So it was about 45 minutes before kickoff when I got to the Olympic Stadium. But of course, even in those days, security was pretty tight. And when I got to go in, I got all my accreditation, everything to go and match ticket and everything. The guy told me that my crash helmet was an offensive weapon. and I went, "No, what you been there for?" He said, "Well, you can throw." I mean, it wasn't a very English conversation, but obviously suggesting I could throw it at people. And so I said, "Okay, I've got to go. Here you are," and it wasn't mine to give away. "Here it is. That's your. You look. You don't want me to take it in. You look." And he went, "Oh no, well." Anyway, I got in. So I sat down about 25 minutes before kickoff, and Italy, obviously the host nation, it was a big night, and they won 2-0, I think. And by the end of the game, and this is a lesson to all commentators, I've done a game with extra time and penalties before I came out. And now I'm doing a game of big magnitude for the tournament. And I'm thinking it's gone quite well, actually, given all the drama in between. So we got to the end and the game was finished. I said, progress for Italy, the host nation is in delight. And the final score, it's Italy 2, Argentina 0. But it was Uruguay. So the penultimate word, before 0 was the last word, and I got wrong. And I thought, you smug so-and-so, you thought, and it was a lesson. I was still relatively early. I've done, over 30 years since then. But I was sitting with one producer there, and he looked at me as if I'd just gone loopy. But I put it all down to the fact that I'd been wearing and carrying a crash helmet. But so, yeah, that's my tale of Italian 90.
And Argentina went on to the final.
Argentina did, but Uruguay didn't, of course, so they've been knocked out.
It
on
was
that
clearly
particular
wishful
night.
thinking.
Yeah, and they, and of course, Italy didn't get to the final, did they? So,
No. Okay, mine is rather more recent. I went for Sirius XM, American radio station, to a Champions League game between Borussia Dortmund, for whom Christian Pulisic was playing at the time, and Monaco. And this turned out to be a game of enormous significance. It wasn't played. And when you're at a game between a German team at the German stadium and a French team, nobody is bothered by ignorant Brits who speak only English in informing them what's going on. And I sat there in the press box wondering, what is going on? And in the end, I had to go and ask somebody to explain to me. And the thing that really moved me after the stadium announcement in German and then in French that the game wasn't going ahead, which I didn't understand, was that the Monaco fans started chanting Borussia Dortmund. I just couldn't get to grips with it. And of course, what this was the bombing of the Borussia Dortmund bus on its way to the stadium. And that had been explained that there had been an incident and it was believed to be a bomb. And somebody now told it to me in English. And people were asked to go, but they lingered. And the emotion between the two sets of supporters was extraordinary, especially as Monaco supporters would now be thinking, we've paid all this money to come to this game, and we're not sure we're going to be able to see it. If people remember, what actually had happened was that one person he'd spent 78,000 euros on buying Borussia Dortmund shares. And I don't understand the finances of this, but it's the equivalent of what you call derivatives. And for some reason, if the share price goes down, you make a load of money. I don't understand that. And he thought that by bombing the team coach, that the share price would go down and he'd be able to make a lot of money. What he also did was he left clues around where the bombs went off just as the coach was pulling away, to say that it was an Islamist extremist group. But he got found out because he had bought the shares online from the hotel room where he was staying, and they traced it from that, the police, and arrested him a couple of days later, and they found fragments of the explosive materials in his room. So it was all very clear, and in the end he pleaded guilty. It mustn't be forgotten that Marc Bartra, the Spanish centre-back who was playing for Dortmund at the time, suffered a broken wrist from flying fragments in the coach, and was out for quite a long time. Was in hospital, I think, for 5 days afterwards. And the whole team must have been so shocked and suffering from this. And so the game was called off. I went back to my hotel. I remember Steve McLaren was staying in the same hotel. He was doing media at the time. I don't think he had a football job at the time. He was doing media. Went back to the hotel, and there was a huge television screen in the bar there, and another game was on, and we all were standing watching that. I don't even remember what it was. And it became clear the next day that UEFA were demanding that the game take place that next evening. And the Borussia Dortmund hierarchy agreed to it. And it said that the manager, Thomas Tuchel, and the players agreed to it, but they don't say the same thing and claim they were put under pressure and made to play. And Monaco won 3-2 at Dortmund. And I think Dortmund must have done ever so well to keep it to that. I didn't see the game because my flight was back next day and I had to come home. So I missed my opportunities to interview Pulisic and what have you. It was just a disaster for Dortmund. The following season they came fourth, which was their lowest position between the year that Jurgen Klopp left, when the club fell apart. He'd been there too long. And last season, when they actually got to the Champions League final, which made it a good season, therefore. And despite coming fifth last season, they got into the Champions League because of the new extra position for two countries, which were Italy and Germany. But it was their worst season. They didn't come as low as fourth between those 2 years. And there is a wide belief, I know, in Dortmund that it was still shock from the whole incident that affected them. The guy who did it got 14 years. I know a number of people who feel that had it been an Islamist or a right-wing or a left-wing extremist group, that the pressure on the government to stop these people coming into the country or stop these people would have been massive. But the fact that it was just a straightforward capitalist, nobody said, we've got to stop these capitalists coming into the country. But that's what they should have done, Martin. That's what they should have done. But it was Thomas Tuchel said later that he felt that the disagreement between him and the hierarchy over the game was what started the process by which he left at the end of the season. But it wasn't Thomas, because at the press conference the day before the game, which I did attend, all the German journalists told me that this couldn't go on. His constant barking at the hierarchy, they weren't going to accept it. So
maybe he's coming over to the UK to bark at our hierarchy. We're going to talk about him.
And I look forward to that, no end.
Yeah.
But it was an astonishing incident. It didn't show UEFA in a good light at all. Absolute lack of understanding and sensitivity, and it must have been awful for the players involved to a degree that we probably don't understand. And it was all about making money. So there you go. That's my trip. I didn't see a game, but
I saw two.
You made up for it. And Dortmund has a wonderful restaurant that serves old style German food. So I got my pork knuckle sauerkraut, and I think I got dumplings on that occasion. Right. Next up, we need to talk about England and Manchester City. Let's start with England. Lee Carsley, Thomas Tuchel. We haven't talked about it on the podcast.
No, we haven't, and it's been an interesting time where interim became interim, when I think at the start the suggestion was that Lee Carsley could follow in the Gareth Southgate pathway and end up with the main job. Clearly the home game against Greece didn't work out for him, although at the end of his 6 games he's budded so many players. He's done what England had to do, get promoted, and he finished with a real flourish. One thing I think we should recognise, people have been saying since the Republic of Ireland game, yes, but it was against 10 men and therefore it was a bit of a gimme. But the truth is, England got Ireland down to 10 men with a moment of absolute quality. Harry Kane's pass into Jude Bellingham and brought down, and Liam Scales of Celtic then got sent off. And so technically the goals all came after the sending off. But I think the freedom of expression, the way young players who were playing their first games, some of them first starts, first goals for a number of them, it was a wonderful way to finish. So when the Wembley game had finished against Greece, where people were, the media particularly, were questioning whether he was the right man at all, now he looks like he could be the next man in line if the Thomas Tuchel experiment, initiative, call it what you will, doesn't work, because Thomas has clearly been given a job. You can come in and you can win the World Cup. That's all we want you to do. All. Nobody's done it since Sir Alf Ramsey. So it always seems so simple when there's no games played and an easy qualifying group might come up, and then it gets to the big games, and England have come up a bit short, not very far short. So if he can be the extra, then I wish him well. He was a popular figure. I mean, you're closer to him at Chelsea than I was, but he lived about I don't know, a long crossfield pass away from me. It also was a different planet in terms of the accommodation. But so I saw a little bit of him when he was the Chelsea manager. He was a hail fellow, well met sort of guy, and we'll see. But I think his stats as Chelsea manager, you should tell us about it, because what was your impression of him?
He came without, of course, having played or managed in England, not having worked in England, and he was fluent in English when he arrived. And his press conferences, he was so charismatic in press conferences, and he was also had something to say, and he gave journalists headlines, he gave them quotes. He was probably, I would say, the best press conference subject since Mourinho at Chelsea, he just so many times he gave insights and what have you into it, and one of my favourites, which in 2021-22, the year after, he won the Champions League at Chelsea. Chelsea came third but didn't win anything. Won the Club World Cup, won the UEFA Super Cup. I don't count those. You know, UEFA Super Cup is one game. Yes, you count it in your overall medals and everything. And yes, it's great to go and to win it. And the Club World Cup is 2 games, but they're not tournaments. They're specials for having won the tournament, the Champions League. And but Chelsea lost both the League Cup final and the FA Cup finals to Liverpool, both on penalties after extra time. And when he was grilled about it the next season, at the beginning of the next season, that they didn't live up to expectations because they hadn't won anything substantial after the Champions League, he said, I will not have my team judged for a whole season on 2 penalty shootouts. And I thought, headline, sensible, very sensible point of view from a manager's point of view, and something that must resonate with supporters and with all football people, saying, actually, that is common sense.
What about the quality of the football Chelsea played under him?
He initiated. He started off playing what I would call 3-2-4-1. 3-2-4-1, and so the wing backs were up with the 2 attacking midfielders, and one was Callum Hudson-Odoi. Callum Hudson-Odoi, who was a winger, he introduced to being a wing back, and I think the other one was probably Marcus Alonso from memory, to begin with. And who was always better going forward than at the back. So
he liked Marcus Alonso because he's tall, and something that was said, and I believe he admitted it, Thomas, that he does like tall players. Yeah. So those are...
Well, we're going to come on to one that he didn't like, who wasn't tall, in 3 of the best. Yeah. But I'll save that for then.
Yeah.
But don't miss that. But yeah, so he then changed that to 3-4-2-1. So the wing backs were wing backs and were Reece James and Ben Chilwell, and level with Kante and Jorginho, or Kovacic, Kante in one of those holding midfielders, and the 2 inside forwards behind the striker. I don't like that shape, Mr. Amorim. I don't like that shape, because that shape gives you really only your centre forward and your 2 number 10s, or as you and I would say, 2 inside forwards, your 2 number 10s as your real attacking players, and your wing backs, who in most of these setups are coming from very deep, and are fullbacks when they get forward, and aren't. Not every fullback is Alexander-Arnold or Reece James with their delivery, Kyle Walker, and so it for me, you're always lacking people in the penalty area. You're always lacking people to score goals, and I hope he doesn't introduce that at England. He played a little bit of that at Bayern Munich, and he does seem to like it. Why wouldn't he? Won the Champions League, but.
Are you suggesting that England won't be as entertaining under Thomas Tuchel? Because they have been entertaining, and the Lee Carsley, they've scored lots of goals.
Yeah. Look, Lee Carsley tried to get all his best attacking players in against Greece, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
I think that Thomas Tuchel said that he created the shape in order to get Kante in his best position, which is a double pivot, and that worked. Kante played some of his best football in the winning of the Champions League, and he went 3 at the back because he obviously didn't trust his centre-backs, and that worked because he was right not to. And he turned Rudiger, who had never really been a back four centre back. He'd been a back four full back for Roma, and it hadn't worked for him at Chelsea up until then. He turned him into a top defender, playing on the left of the back three. Now, of course, at Real Madrid, it's not working too well this year at the moment either, but it has worked.
But it is a unique thing, isn't it, to be brought in just for basically 18 months. And I guess if he was to win the World Cup, that would be a continued conversation.
You would say though that Thomas has been an 18-month manager. You know, he got Borussia Dortmund they won a cup under him, the DFB Pokal, and they don't win trophies that often. He of course got Paris Saint-Germain to the Champions League final. He won the Champions League with Chelsea. He has turned into an 18-month manager, so I don't have a problem with that. I am totally opposed to international countries having foreigners as manager, because you can't have foreigners as players. I think the qualification to be a manager should be the same as a player in that.
Yeah, it wouldn't be quite so restrictive, because the players aren't so restrictive as it used to be.
No, exactly. But I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah,
I'm comfortable with that. But I don't think. I think it's pointless. That's all. I think. I don't think there'll be an issue in the dressing room, because he's got such wonderful English, and probably better than some English managers. But so I don't think that will be a problem. But I don't think it makes any sense. That's all.
No, it's definitely a point of view that the international rules for players should apply to managers as well. I don't think we've mentioned this on the podcast before. No non-nationality of the World Cup winners, they've all been of the country that they've been representing. Yeah. So whether that's, these things change. Listen, one thing I've never said, I've been lucky enough to commentate for coming up to 50 years. I've never said England have won the World Cup. And I guess I might be running out of time. So Thomas, good luck, whatever the FA come to do.
Yeah.
I having lived through it as you did, the vast majority of our country do not know the effect it had. They've seen it in other countries, of course, but when it's yours, and 66 is such a special time in our lives watching. I know it was at home, and there were 16 countries. It wasn't quite as competitive. You had to work hard to qualify. The others did. Of course, England qualified as hosts, so it was. But it was still extremely special. And if it was to happen again, I don't think many of us would care who the manager is. He's just a winning manager.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to England under 21s now, with Lee Carsley going back there. But if having won the Euros last time out, if he went and defended it,
England's record and the underage groups has improved immeasurably, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, under Paul Simpson, Steve Cooper, and Lee Carsley winning trophies is not a problem, which is something that we should just in passing emphasise, that the system is working very well. The oddity about the system is these young players are developed by clubs, and then when they get into senior football, as we've just seen over the last few days, they're representing a different club. Yeah. There are very few. We worked at Curtis Jones of the actual squad. Bukayo Saka wasn't in it, remember? So Curtis Jones, through the Liverpool ranks, still a Liverpool player, and Rico Lewis, Manchester City still. But all the other 5 of them came from Chelsea and are not at Chelsea anymore. Who got on the pitch in that game? I think all 5 of them. So that's something that I think needs investigation as to why that is happening. I'd be surprised if you look back, say 5 years, it wouldn't be the same.
No, I agree, and I want to give you one absolutely critical statistic about England. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are our producers ready for this? Because I haven't forewarned you. I'm going to do this. And this is the most critical statistic I have come across in decades.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the 1800s, 8 players represented England who had double-barreled surnames. In the 1900s, the whole of the 1900s, 1 player represented England
Ian
who
Storey-Moore.
had double-barreled surname.
He played once, I think, didn't he? Ian Storey-Moore.
In the 2000s, so far, 149 players have represented England who have double-barreled surnames.
Wow. Well, that tells us a lot about life and not so much about football.
At Chelsea, in the under-21s, there's a player who's got a double-barreled first name and a double-barreled surname. He is going to be my favourite player for the next 10 years, wherever he finishes.
And one of the things that I always say to commentators is, the young commentators, I get asked as a sort of a guru, can I give some advice? I say, respect the names. Make sure that you pronounce it as they want the names pronounced. And it is more complicated with the double barrel names. It is more complicated, and some of the names are not exactly a slave to their spelling. So you have to work hard at it. Find the player and ask him. That's always been my rule, if you possibly can. Not so easy now, because they're not as accessible, but you can always find them somehow.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Get them to send you a voice note. That's what I do. I get somebody at the club to ask the player voice notes of, I'm just learning about how good they are. and the player will say, you asked me this morning about, well, Fass, I've got it on my phone.
Yeah.
At Leicester. And that's a good way.
Because he's got an accent over the A,
Yeah, well, there you go.
which completely confuses
But if he
me.
says it, sometimes they say what you want to hear. Was it Stefan Johansson who played for Fulham, Norwegian? He went Johansson on the thing. It's not. We can't be having you. I think we've talked about the Palo One Chop incident in the past, which had Barry Davis and I'm running for cover in the end.
Brilliant.
But the names are really important, and especially now they're more complex and from different backgrounds, and show respect to the name.
As we talk, Manchester City have lost 5 games in a row, climaxing with the 4-0 against
Anti-climaxing.
Tottenham. Yeah. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, there's off days, there's crumbling, and there's crumbling and sudden disintegration, and you don't come back from that. Am I right to think that?
Well, you can think that, but which one of those are you applying to Manchester City?
Crumbling and disintegration. For the first time now, I'm beginning to think that.
Well, what I would say, because this is one conversation we did know we were going to have, watching the highlights, I was at Arsenal on the day, so I didn't see the game live. But watching the highlights, it seemed to me that Erling Haaland could have scored 4 himself. Yeah. So
that's part of the disintegration, maybe.
Well, I don't think it is, because he's going to score. Yeah. He's going to score plenty of goals. The problem is no one else is scoring any goals. And of course, the sort of poignancy of Rodri taking his Ballon d'Or trophy onto the field before the game and brandishing it quite rightfully triumphantly is a fantastic honour for somebody who's not a headline maker, except in the sense that everybody knows Manchester City find it hard to win without him. But he's just an all-action, multi-talented player. With an excellent brain on and off the field, he's a fascinating guy. So for that, and then the final score when they're leaving the pitch at the end, I mean, the contrast could hardly be greater. One or two of the moves haven't worked. We trumpeted the return of Gundogan. He was so good before.
You did.
Yeah, okay. But I thought he was a short-term replacement. But I didn't think this short-term.
Well, I would say that Gundogan was never a replacement for Rodri, because if you remember in the 2021 Champions League final, the big mistake, that was charged against Pep Guardiola was leaving out Fernandinho, and who was Rodri there then, or was it somebody else who would have covered for him as the regular holding midfielder? I can't remember. And playing Gundogan there then.
Well, Rodri was there then.
Yeah, so he left out Fernandinho, who was the first choice, and Rodri, who was the cover. and play Gundogan there between, I think, De Bruyne and Silva. And that really led to the Chelsea goal, because the defensive cover in front of the centre-backs wasn't there. And Mason Mount passed Kai Havertz in, and the goal was scored, the only goal of the game. And I don't think Ilkay Gundogan has ever been a defensive midfielder.
Well, no, he was signed when Rodri was fit, so he wasn't signed.
But this summer, of course, or the previous summer, they signed Mateo Kovacic from Chelsea. And it is Kovacic, by the way, not Kovacic, isn't it?
Right.
But he doesn't have. I've watched him for 5 years. He has no defensive smell whatsoever. He does not smell danger at all. He has no qualities defending as the defensive midfielder. He's a pass and drive me up the flipping wall, pass again player. Give it, get it, give it, get it. And he's very good at moving a team up the pitch from the middle of their own half to the middle of the opposition half. But he's not somebody who can snuff out danger like Rodri, like Fernandinho, and he lost out in the Chelsea midfield to Kante, who obviously is world class, or was world class, and probably still is, and Jorginho, because Jorginho, who can't run, can smell danger. So he had his weaknesses, but he could see what the danger was. At Manchester City, I look and no one smells danger, but they're also an aging team, and during the Euros, it was clear that Kyle Walker was struggling. It was clear that he'd lost some pace. Whether that was the end of a tired season, whether that was an injury or what, he was struggling. And he's come into the season and it's not come back. And these things happen. Your legs go and he's not come back. He's still a top personality to have in your team. He's still a top quality.
I think
but when Timo Werner burnt him in Tottenham's fourth goal, he's gone. He's not the same.
You're talking about individual components. I think it's more. I think it's what would worry me is if I was a Manchester City fan would be a malaise that losing becomes a habit as much as winning does.
But on top of that, Rodri has got this extraordinary record with Manchester City that they hardly ever lose with him and hardly often lose without him. But I keep looking at. I noticed in the last couple of weeks that Roy Keane and Ian Wright agreed that the best Premier League player of the last 10 years was Kevin De Bruyne. Manchester City don't win nearly as much without Kevin De Bruyne. So they're constantly not ahead where they would be ahead with him. And people say, he came back from a long injury around the new year last season and he wasn't quite the same. And he wasn't quite the same physically. But that's when they went on the run of winning games that took them to the title. And I saw games where he couldn't run and was by a mile the best player on the pitch. By a mile. They miss him as much as they miss Rodri in terms of winning games.
And Ruben Dias as well, who's the big defensive organiser. And all the others are very good defenders, but you need somebody who takes collective responsibility. And he's the best at that. So he's a big miss as well. So yes, you can go through if we had a list of players who not up to scratch, has done okay in the second. The new players are coming in, like Savinho, in difficult circumstances. Now that's not the Manchester City they expected to join a team.
He's lacked product, hasn't he, Savinho?
Very few players have done it for Pep in their first season. He's got time on his side. But what is so fascinating is this. There's no questioning the genius of Pep Guardiola. Now that genius is there are all sorts of facets of the genius. If you talk about various different ways he's been successful, but one thing he probably hasn't had to do is halt a run like what we know. He's never lost 5 in a row, but he's now got some other tough games coming up as well. So and he's signed his new contract, which kind of, I guess, was supposed to be a shot in the arm for the club as the uncertainty around whether he was going to go or not. So
it was a shot in the backside.
Everybody knew now, and knows now, before the game was played, that there was 2 more years of Pep to come. So that made the result against Tottenham more extraordinary, really. But the key moments, Maddison wasn't tracked, and
By Gundogan.
by Gundogan, and Haaland missed the chances where, if you were watching the highlights and you didn't know the score, which quite a lot of people do when they watch Match of the Day, they try and keep out of the way of the score. You would be thinking Haaland's going to equalise or make it 2-2
but
or
the
whatever.
pressing,
you know?
the pressing wasn't group pressing. It wasn't that Manchester City way. I've got a question for you, and for Thomas Tuchel and for Lee Carsley as well as Pep. What is Rico Lewis's best position? Because I'm beginning to think there's not one.
Well, that's something that it does depend on where you get picked and what Rico Lewis can't walk into Thomas Tuchel or walk into
I'm just feeling
Pep
sorry.
Guardiola and say, "This is what I want to do." Now,
but-
some players can do that,
Yeah,
and
but-
they will accept the consequences.
I'm feeling
But he
sorry
can.
for him because he's right back one week, he's left back the next week, he's right midfield in a 3 the next week.
When he's right back, he's into midfield because that's the way
Yeah.
the modern game is. And watching Arsenal last weekend was watching the fullbacks going into midfield. It's just the way it is now.
Yeah.
So you don't go, "Oh, that's clever." I mean, I haven't coached in non-league at senior level this season, but last season we were coming against it in the National League South, fullbacks going into midfield. So it's sort of a trend. It'll be interesting to see whether there is going to be a change of philosophy from Pep. I can't believe it. I mean, what can he do? He can get the players fit. That's the first thing that he can do. He can have a look at who's really in form but the games come so thick and fast. But he is somebody who sticks with players. So we know that you have a streak when you play every game, and then you have a streak where you're lucky to be on the bench, So he obviously moves in quite a unique way in that respect. But I know he'll be hating it, but the truth is you have to have the pain to really, really, really appreciate the gain. And when you think now, when people think Man City and they've just won 6 leagues in 7 seasons, 4 in a row for the first time. I mean, how painful is that, really, when you've got 5 in a row? Well, because the standards are so high. You're hoist by your own petard, is that the expression? If you don't win 5 in a row, you seem to be a failure. Other teams can win 2, lose 2, and draw 1, and they've had a good month, So I think it's great watching. It's not great for those involved, but how it's going to be solved, I think it's going to be the story of the next. And of course, we've got the other half of Manchester unveiling a new way of playing, a new coach. So, I mean, for many a month in my career, the eyes have been on Manchester. They're certainly going to be on Manchester. And meanwhile, with eyes on Liverpool, then, they have the opportunity now to almost put City away. And that's unthinkable after 12 or 13 games,
That's happened before, and they have been put away, and they've still come back and won the league.
Well, they have, and I was at Arsenal, and somebody reminded me, don't forget, I think it was the 97-98 season, was it? And they were 13 points adrift and won the league. Yeah. And that was 13 points adrift in the new year. It wasn't Arsenal, now. Arsenal, yeah.
Okay, will they be all right?
City. I'm only hesitating because losing 5 in a row in non-league football, I know what that's like. It's bloody awful. And however wonderful you are and however gifted you are,
It puts a
it's
doubt
tough.
in your mind as well.
Yeah, it does. But they will be all right. Yeah, they will be all right. But what is all right for most people might not be all right for City.
I think there will have to be change for them to come back from this. And that change may be the January transfer market. But yeah.
Yes. One thing we haven't said, I don't know, and City fans but has the fact that these charges have been hanging over City for so long, are people now, is it wearing down within the structure of the club? I have no way of knowing that's true or not, but I know that I would guess that being under investigation for a long period is not a very nice thing, even though you believe, and Pep absolutely categorically believes that the City will be found innocent of all these charges. But it's still something, it's a nagging toothache in your life, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, still to come, three of the best comparisons, in which there'll be a Manchester City pair in there. Everton, Aston Villa. Oh, we're going the rounds today. And stoppage time. But right now, it is Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry.
Letter from the Gantry.
I pricked up my ears when I heard that the new head coach of Manchester United, Ruben Amorim, favoured the defensive system of three at the back. It reminded me of a tricky couple of days with the manager whom every successor is still trying to emulate, Sir Alex Ferguson, who had a rare flirtation with that system and in doing so made my commentary of an FA Cup tie extremely complicated. Let me take you back to January 1996. The great Scot was still playing Alex then, or Alec, as he's known by his friends. Manchester United had been drawn at home to Sunderland in the third round of the FA Cup, and the draw led to a draw, 2-2. Sunderland were then, as now, in the Championship, so it was an excellent result for their bright, witty young manager, Peter Reid. Reid was not yet 40 years old and had been in charge on Wearside for less than a year, but already had locked horns with Manchester United and their illustrious manager during a 3-year stint in charge of Manchester City. The replay was 10 days later at Roker Park to be covered live by Sky Sports, commentary from Andy Gray and myself. Always trying to be a diligent researcher, I managed to reach Alex on the phone on the day prior to the game. He explained generously that after the first match, when it needed a goal from Eric Cantona with 10 minutes to go to avoid defeat at Old Trafford, that he was going to change his tactics. He let me in on what the change was going to be. A switch from his usual 4 at the back to a 3 with the experienced Paul Parker in the middle of that new formation. For me, of course, it was a golden nugget of information, something that I assured Alex that I would keep totally under wraps until I was on the gantry close to kick-off, when I would share it with my colleagues, especially Andy Gray. Imagine my shock when I arrived at the ground the next day, some 3 hours before kick-off, to find Andy and Peter Reid in deep conversation about the United defensive change, which I thought was top secret. They, of course, were great mates from their highly successful playing days at Everton, winning the league title, the FA Cup and the European Cup Winners' Cup. I acted dumb and asked if Peter was sure of the United change, knowing inwardly that he had been very well informed. In my whole career, I never felt more between a rock and a hard place. I couldn't betray the trust put in me the day before, and so I chose not to shed further light on a conversation between two people I liked enormously and would have loved to have helped. Peter obviously had his own sources to protect, so the upshot was a compromise beginning into the broadcast, which I've never seen before or since. Instead of 2 team lineups, there were 4. Manchester United's conventional system, and how Sunderland's 11 would be deployed if that happened. Then the suggested, but actually known, alteration to a back 3, and how Peter would alter his team shape to try to cope. So that was how we started our commentary. And sure enough, Paul Parker adopted a sweeper's role with Gary Neville and Steve Bruce either side of him as the other central defenders. But it didn't really work. Sunderland took the lead through striker Phil Gray, and United left the field at half-time a goal down. Alex Ferguson was typically decisive. Off came Parker, replaced by Lee Sharp, and the 4-4-2 was reinstated with Lee on the left. On the hour, with United still trailing, Paul Scholes came on for Nicky Butt, and 10 minutes later struck an equaliser. With extra time looming, Andy Cole spared United's blushes and took them through to round 4. So all had ended well for Manchester United and their high-profile boss. I travelled home the next morning and had been back an hour or two when the phone rang. My wife Paula answered and said, "Mr. Ferguson wants a word with you." I began cheerily, "Well done last night. All the best for the next round," only to be on the receiving end of a blast as icy as any I had felt in the northeast the night before. "I trusted you. You told Sunderland about the way we were going to line up." I knew I was not guilty. Sunderland had already known, but Alex had already come to his verdict. I protested strongly, but not very successfully. My best line of defence was telling him that while listening to Peter and Andy pre-match, it came out that their knowledge was gained from information that the system of play had been trialled in a practice match at United's training ground earlier in the week. "Did you have a practice match?" I asked the great man. "Aye." You never told me this, but Sunderland knew when I arrived. I promise you, I didn't betray your trust. Look elsewhere for the leak. By then, I did know how Sunderland got their intel, but that was another confidentiality, so I kept it to myself, even though it would have totally got me off the Ferguson hook. It is now time to tell, at least most of it. Sunderland were tipped off by a former Manchester United player who'd moved to another club in the northeast of England. He hadn't severed his ties with his mates who were still at Old Trafford, some of whom had actually played in that practice game to work on the back three. He also had friends at Sunderland, so he let the cat out of the bag for the benefit of the Black Cats. He, not me, was responsible for the leak. Manchester United went on to the final, where they faced Liverpool, whose own three at the back at the time had given the Red Devils problems in other encounters around that period. I only found out this week, and I might add from an impeccable source, that switching to a back three was seriously considered by Alex Ferguson in the build-up to that final in 1996. But unlike at Sunderland, he changed his mind before rather than during the game, and United posted a 1-0 win at Wembley.
Did he forgive you?
I'd like to think so, but I'm not sure.
I wonder if he found out who it was.
Well,
You gave him enough clues.
I've given some clues, but I'm not going to.
I wonder if he found out after you
I
said
think he'd prefer it that it was me. I think.
Yeah, probably.
But it wasn't. Alec, if you're listening, that's the truth.
Okay. Oh, God. That finding out teams' lineups. When I was doing the old club call 0898 for Chelsea, QPR, and Wimbledon at the same time, if they're all in the top flight, if they were playing each other, both managers would phone me up the night before and say, "I know you know the team. What is it? Bobby Gould, Joe Kinnear." It would be Bobby Campbell at Chelsea. At QPR, it'd be Jim Smith or Trevor Francis. I know you know the team. What is it? And I'd say, I do know the team, but I'm not telling them your team, and I know that, and I'm not telling you their team.
That's occasionally been an occupational hazard for me. And I use exactly the same words. Say, look, if I was to tell you theirs, you think I can, And one or two managers have said, I'll give you mine if you give me theirs, and that's not fair. But I think now, I mean, we've had the Bielsa Spygate in recent times, but I think that there aren't many secrets in football.
No. And players talk.
Yeah. Was it Jose Mourinho who announced that I'm not going to give you my team, but I'll give you theirs? Yeah. Barcelona.
Yeah. And then he did give his team, and he gave it wrongly.
Yes.
And he left out Damien Duff. And I got back to the hotel, and Damien Duff phoned me and said, "What the hell's going on? I thought I was playing tomorrow." And Mourinho said, "I'm not." I said, "You are. Just ignore it." Press conferences. Yeah.
It actually, we do now get the teams 75 minutes before kickoff. That was a privilege for the broadcasters. Now it's for everybody.
Yeah.
So you can go online if you want to know, or go on to Twitter feeds of your X feeds of your favourite club, and the lineups will be there, which I think makes it a lot easier. When I first started, you got them half an hour before kickoff, and you had to get from the one side of the ground up a ladder on the other side of the ground through the crowd, and then process the news that you got. So they make it a lot easier now. But yeah, I'll never forget that January 1996.
It is time for 3 of the best.
Boom. And and Neil, what do I say? And he makes them pay.
Thank you.
3 of the best. He's made them pay, and that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
Now, someone I've just mentioned is going to come into 3 of the best, so we'll come on to that in a moment. But first of all, let's have your young player.
Well, I was going to go with Curtis Jones, who I think has done really, really well for club and country, and is still just in the young player category. But I got my first view of Ethan Nwaneri playing for Arsenal. I obviously know about him, seen him. I saw his goals in the League Cup. I think a couple against Bolton, one against Preston, And he was, of course, the 15-year-old that played in the Premier League's youngest player, and he's now 17 and a good bit. And I think he's in the top 9 Premier League goal scorers, having got his first Premier League goal against Nottingham Forest. But actually, the memory, it was a very, very nice goal, when I finishing, just almost giving the goalkeeper the eyes and putting it in the short side, if you like. But before that, he glided Messi-like past. In fact, even he's a bit more upright than Messi, and he's just gliding. And the ball hardly moved to one side, but it was enough. And it was like on skates on ice. It was just a moment. And I've been blessed at being, I remember I was commentating when Ryan Giggs got a surprising debut before the Premier League for Manchester United at home to Everton. And you knew it was a special day, you know. I saw Maradona play when he was, well, everybody knew about Maradona when he was like 12, I think, but, you know, to see him in the flesh. So for Ethan, he's got to get in the team, but I'm told that there have been occasions where he's been sub and the other players have been saying, get him on, because they know how good he can be. It's always a big test for young players to be able to deal with the pressure and the limelight. I believe there were requests after the game against Nottingham Forest for him to do an interview, and Arsenal said no, he's not ready to do that yet, and that's their right to do that.
And hail that, because now kids are pushed in front of cameras when they're playing in the youth team.
But that should help in a way. I think the media training is quite good at the clubs, and that's certainly something that's only come in the last 10 or 15 years with websites and things like that.
But
so
it gives them heads that are so huge.
But I think it can work in an egocentric way, which is bad for the player, but also, you know, if you're virtually schooled into this is what you're going to say, then it also takes some independence of thought away as well. But listen, whether he talks or whether he doesn't, his football is doing the talking, and he's going to play. If Odegaard now has another injury, he came back. Odegaard was splendid in the game, but he filled in that. That's sort of where he played in the game I've seen. I'm sure he can play. I think he can play right up front as well. But special talent. And I hope he makes it with this club that have developed him, unlike the point we were making earlier, like Bukayo Saka. So Arsenal have got a bit of previous in this respect. But it is kind of weird tracing the origins of the top players back to other clubs when they've had good schooling. It's not as though they've been at lower division clubs. You understand players like Jared Bowen, for example, and become Hereford to Hull, and got to the top by the old route, if you like. He's special. So it was a scouting mission to go to the game. I've got an Arsenal game coming up soon, and it was that made it.
Well, my young player is one who's gone to another club, Lewis Hall, Newcastle United, England left back now, and had a very good game, I thought, in his full debut. In the second game against Ireland. But I just want to bring up this interesting thing about Lewis. When he was coming through the ranks at Chelsea, he was a central midfielder. And he was good, but he wasn't special. He was good, he was fast, and he got the odd goal, and he made goals, but he wasn't special. But he was good enough, especially physically. He didn't have a big personality either. He was good enough, especially physically, to get a debut in the first team under Thomas Tuchel. And where did he play? He played in the back three on the left. Now, I've seen Mark Cucurella play in the back three on the left at the highest level enough times to know that if you're 5'6", you're going to struggle. In the end, you're going to struggle. And he didn't struggle, Lewis Hall. He was outstanding on this game, and he made overlapping runs like a fullback, like a wingback. So in his next cup game that he got the opportunity to play, he did play left wingback. And then as time went on, he became a left back and played that almost solely for the club. He once was selected in midfield, which was the position that he grew up in, and the position I believe he wanted to play, and he was awful in the first team. So the lesson is, in the end, that you may not finish up being outstanding at where you grew up. But if you're outstanding, you'll get there somewhere or other. And he's got there at left back, and I can't imagine him playing anywhere else now.
With Tino Livramento, another who started at Chelsea, the right back at the moment in Newcastle.
Who I seem to remember as a right winger. But, yeah. So anyway, Lewis Hall, good player. When he made his real impact at Chelsea as a youngster, my fellow Sirius XM presenter, Rocky Ray Hudson, who you know, just went on and on at me that he's got the smallest mouth I've ever seen in football. So everybody, next time you watch Lewis Hall, check his mouth. But it works very well, I understand. Okay, old player.
Well, yes, you won't have heard of him. You might have heard of him this week. Roberto Cevoli, who is the coach of San Marino, who have made history for a nation with a population of 30,000 people by not only winning a game away from home, a first competitive away win, but getting promoted, topping one of the D sections, the bottom rung of the Nations League ladder, but they've got themselves out of it and they'll be in the C section in the next time around. And why it's fascinated me, Neil, is because England played them 8 times, and I think I've done pretty much all of those games, and they have been a chore to do because you know that the result is just a question of how many. In fact, the last was 10-0 3 years ago for England to get double figures for the first time for a while. And they are the sort of games that maybe the Nation League was trying to eliminate from our calendar by pitting them against, at least in one part of the calendar, against teams of their own level. They beat Liechtenstein and Gibraltar also in that group, and they've won it. 7 points for a team that could hardly get one goal, so it's a fantastic achievement. England, in those games, England scored 52 and they scored 1, and you might well remember it, listeners and viewers will remember it, which of course came in the first 9 seconds in Bologna from Stuart Pearce's, I'm sorry Stuart, who's a top guy and a friend of mine. It gets mentioned more than his buccaneering work in his great England career. And Davide Gualtieri pounced on this and somehow read this back pass, and England found themselves 1 down. It was the last game of Graham Taylor's reign, I think. So so the step up is enormous, absolutely enormous. And he's an Italian, the coach, but he's got San Marino citizenship, and I should imagine he'll be getting all sorts of honours from the administration, because it's very special. It is a real ultimate underdog story.
I've got 2 old boys this week, old players. Damien Duff, Blackburn, Chelsea, Newcastle, Fulham. Obviously won the League Cup at Blackburn. He won 2 leagues and a League Cup at Chelsea, and he got to the Europa League final with Fulham. And he played in the World Cup for Ireland and played brilliantly in the World Cup for Ireland in 2002. He was outstanding. So a wonderful footballing career. He always wanted to go back to Ireland. He always wanted to settle. He was 150% Irish, and he wanted to get back there. And he has won in the last few weeks the Irish League for his club Shelbourne. It's the first time they've won it since 2006, and it's just an incredible achievement. They're a small club, and he has taken them.
It's the summer season as well, so they've come to the climax.
So it's just happened. Yeah. He has taken them to the highest honours. He actually got a motivational video before the game. They had to win their last game away in order to win it. And he went and got a motivational video from none other than Jose Mourinho, which he played to the players in the dressing room before the game. So that was something that work well. I mean, just the loveliest fella in the world, Damien Duff, loveliest family in the world, and
Nicknamed Duffer, but clearly not one.
yeah, I'm just so overjoyed for him. So that's one. The other one is a guy who was one of the best, took in Lewis Hall, one of the best left backs I've ever seen, one of the best left backs in the world. And I thought, always a trifle unlucky not to win loads and loads more caps for Brazil. And this was Atletico Madrid's Felipe Luis, who spent one season, and not a good season. He didn't play well, and he barely played. At Chelsea, came over with Diego Costa, basically, to keep him happy. Chelsea won the league, but he didn't play. He was in the 2014 Atletico Madrid league, La Liga winning team and Champions League runners-up team, and then back there to be in their Champions League runners-up team in 2017, was it 2016? 16 yeah. Against Real Madrid. He mostly didn't play for Brazil because of Marcelo, but I'm not sure he wasn't. Marcelo was an unbelievable player going forward, but Felipe Luis could do both back and forward, and I thought he was an outstanding player. When he left Atletico Madrid, went back to Brazil and played on. He retired from playing a year ago, at the end of the Brazilian season, and unlike top Brazilian players now, went into coaching. The top Brazilian players don't do this. Now, Tim Vickers has written Vickery, Tim, has written an excellent article on this and listed the Argentine players who have gone into coaching. Fernando Gago, Martin Demichelis, Kili Gonzalez, Gabriel Heinze, Hernan Crespo. He's just been sacked, hasn't he? Martin Palermo, Carlos Tevez is coaching now. But the Brazilians haven't, and the only one of note who is really making a name for himself, but not a huge name, is over here in Europe. And that is I've lost it. But there's only one. But Felipe Luis went into coaching a year ago and finished up being the first team coach of Flamengo because of sackings and everything within a few months. And they have just won the Brazilian Cup against Atletico Mineiro over 2 legs. And they won the second leg 1-0 away. And at half time, he substituted the famous Bebe goal. Is that Bebe goal? He's known as, isn't he? The Brazilian striker who often plays up front for the national team. That's Gabriel Barbosa. Gabigol, he's known.
Gabigol, yeah.
And he's won the cup. And with Brazil not getting Carlo Ancelotti, and with Tete never doing it, and now their new manager not doing it, and they're really having a poor
Dorival,
time.
isn't it? The new manager. Dorival.
Will Felipe Luis get fast forwarded to be the Brazil national team coach? It's a very interesting one. He came to England having never learned English, having never played in England, but having an absolute love for American films. And he spoke really good English from just having watched American films and learned the language.
Neil has this crusade that every major job in world football has a Chelsea connection.
Well, my last one will do, but not in the same way. Anyway, Damien Duff and Felipe Luis, two kind of unsung heroes in their careers, and now doing it in managerial careers. Brilliant. Your player.
Well, James Maddison not only inspired Spurs to beating Manchester City a few days ago, but also sort of showed again what a top player he is. And clearly, Ange Postecoglou keeps him on quite a tight rein, I think. If his standards drop during games, I mean, he's off, and he's not the only one. Everybody, you probably saw Son get taken off, much to his almost disgust, even though there was a logical reason for it, and apparently he knew he was coming off. But players don't like being substituted, particularly when you've got a wonderful career brewing and all the stats in your folder, so to speak. So I just thought he's a very charming person, James, and he sometimes that probably gets him into the public eye a bit more than perhaps he needs to be. But he's very good to be around, and he is a real talent. And I was trying to think, have there been internationally? He's made one or two mistakes about when he wasn't available and where he was seen in that period when he was supposed to be sort of recovering from an injury. But who could I liken him to? I thought Matt Le Tissier maybe to some extent, who only got sort of 7 or 8 caps, I think, and yet was bewitching opponents of Southampton. They're not quite the same, but they are people who've got good opinions and will happily have a chat, Going back even further, there have been a few maverick-type players, and I think what I want to see is James Maddison not be a maverick, because he's better than that, and therefore the consistency, his ability to spot a pass, to score a goal at this level should make him a first name on the team sheet, and certainly somebody. Maybe these days to play 90 minutes is asking a bit much, because with the 5 subs, half the team don't play 90 minutes every week. So, but it was a great day for him. It was a great day for Tottenham, and we've talked about the other side of the coin with Manchester City. But I think Spurs deserve more praise for that than Manchester City deserve criticism, to be honest with you, because it was such the right time to play. And we could say that, or we're going to get a backlash. They've lost 4 in a row. We're not going to go up there and score 4 without reply, are we? Oh yeah, we just have. So well done, and he was at the key to him. And as I say, he's one of the footballers. If you're lucky enough to bump into him, you'll enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, and I think he's such a talent. Such a talent. My player is Barcelona and France's Jules Koundé. After football restarted following the lockdown in COVID, it started abroad before it started in England, across Europe, because England was kind of later getting it, and an awful lot later getting rid of it. COVID inquiry. But Spain started before, and Koundé was the centre-back of Sevilla, I think, at the time. And I was bewitched. He was maybe, I think he's about 25, 26, 27 now. So this is 4 years ago. I didn't know him, and he was electric. And he was just everywhere defensively covering. And I'll tell you who he reminded me of. He reminded me of one of my favourite ever centre-backs, who I don't think gets the credit he deserves, because he didn't look after his career and maybe the way that he could have done, was William Gallas, who probably made himself unpopular with every supporter in London, because he went from Chelsea to Tottenham to Arsenal, and probably played got worse at each club. But my experience of him was he was world class, absolutely world class. Played in the World Cup final, of course, in 2006, and he was a top player, and Koundé was, I can't remember who he was playing at the back with, but whoever he was playing at the back with, he was just covering him the whole time. And in 2020, summer 22, when Chelsea were looking for a centre-back, Koundé was the first one that they were looking for. And Thomas Tuchel, I promised I'd come back to Thomas Tuchel, kept, I am informed at the last moment, saying, no, he's too short. He's too short. Because he's 5'10". Well, I don't know what that is in metres, sorry, but he's 5'10". No, he's too short. But I tell you, I've never seen him out-headed. He's got the most wonderful timing, the most wonderful leap. He is absolutely brilliant. But in the end, pressure told, and he moved to Barcelona because Chelsea pulled out on him, and he became a right back. And he played right back for Sevilla, and he's not a good right back. I don't think he's a good right back, except that after a few years of playing it, he's now a world-class right back. And in the last Barcelona game in the Champions League, he got a hat-trick of assists. And he was unbelievable. His movement was incredible. His use of the ball was incredible. Of course, he played right back for France in the 2022 World Cup final. And I think Jules Koundé has gone from being a world-class centre-back in the making to a world-class right-back in the offing. I think he's absolutely fabulous, and I wish my club had bought him.
So there is a Chelsea
to play centre-back. Thomas. Right, listen, we're overrunning time, so we're going to be very quick now. Ladies and gentlemen, and anybody else, if you wanted to find yourself somehow else, it's your freedom. But don't bomb anyone. Comparisons. 3 comparisons. First one, Carl Walker and Tony Book. Now, you better explain who Tony Book is for people.
Well, Tony Book was a non-league player who, at the age of 29, I think, was signed to go and play in the first division for Manchester City.
Having been at...
Bricklayer.
Yeah, but he played
bricklayer.
in the Football League after non-league.
I don't know that he had.
Hadn't he? No, I thought
maybe
he
we
did.
can check that. Yeah.
Plymouth, do you have a few?
Yeah, maybe he did. Yeah. But he was a West Country gentleman and still has a lovely West Country accent.
He's 90 now.
Yes. And he became a symbol of the golden era for Manchester City when they and captained them and then later managed them.
For 5 years he managed.
Yeah.
But they won the league with him as captain.
They won the league, they won the FA Cup, they won the League Cup, I think. They won a European trophy as well. I mean, he legend is a much overused word, but this could never happen now.
He played until he was just short of his 40th birthday.
Yeah,
the summer he
was
retired.
Footballer of the Year, for goodness sake. Footballer of the Year. Having been right back, having been laying bricks for the what you would call the best years of his career, you know, and then he turned it. So evergreen. I mean, you couldn't have positionally it's similar, but you can't with Carl Walker. But the rewards similar. I mean, Carl's probably got more medals than Tony has, but Tony's got a lot. And the type of football that not so dissimilar, but if Manchester City fans had to pick their 2 best right backs ever, you've just got them, really.
Yeah, I mean, Carl Walker, I had a bit of a dig at earlier on, but what a player he has been, and who's to say won't be more so, but he has been. I mean, I thought when they signed him, I was one of those people who said £50 million for a bloke who makes awful, who's obviously good, but makes awful mistakes every game. That was at Tottenham.
A little insight because I know our listeners like the FIFA references. Kyle and I did a commentary on a FIFA game live at White Hart Lane for a selected audience, and that's the first time I ever really sat down and talked to him, and he did very well. It was obviously for some commercial thing for Tottenham, so we sat there and the game came up and we called. We didn't know what was coming up. It was just like doing a real game, but it was the FIFA figures. So yeah, he was. He might have. I can write a reference for him if he wants to go into co-commentating, because. But he's done really well from Sheffield. You know, we talk about from other clubs. You know, from Sheffield United, he was loaned to Villa, wasn't he, for a while, and he sort of worked his way up, and you know, he's a stellar career.
Jordan Pickford and Neville Southall.
Well, Everton goalkeepers, there's a similarity there, of course. Jordan's very much a modern-day goalkeeper with a lot of data to sprinkle over his ability. I always think he knows his sense of anticipation is very good. A penalty record, of course, we know he's very well prepared in that. But Neville was a fantastic goalkeeper. I mean, he came in at a time where Everton were having a bit of a revolution. He didn't get in the team straight away. because I think they signed 7 players at the start of the 1981-82 season, and there were a couple of goalkeepers in that, but he got himself in the team, and the team blossomed. Bright young manager in Howard Kendall, but he's a one-off. Jordan is too. Really, they are the goalkeeping personalities. They are different. If you want to play in goal all your life, you have to be. You can't be the one who's got that. You're an individual in a team game, and these two guys are real individuals. And Neville's, I think he's a fascinating person on a lot of subjects. He's got his own social media platforms, and I would suggest you have a look, because you'll find that it's not just an ex-footballer. There's somebody who's got a real grasp of some of the major issues in our society, and maybe Jordan will find that when he's retired. But at the moment, he's got a real grasp on the football that comes his way. So you could write a book on any goalkeeper, because they are interesting people, very, very different. There are very few that would have wanted to be. Edison probably is the one who comes closest to being an outfield player in goal. But proud to have worked a little bit with both of Jordan
I think Neville. The biggest difference between them is that Neville Southall played in a team constantly going for trophies, and so didn't have a lot to do in games, and had to still keep, had to have no mistakes. Jordan Pickford has been constantly in a team that's struggling, and has had to perform heroics 10 minutes in, 10 minutes out, and perhaps the mistakes therefore are a little bit more covered up by the heroics that he undoubtedly has achieved.
Both outstanding international careers. Really, people talk about Jordan Pickford. I mean, just look at what he's done for England. It's incredible. He has undoubtedly been rightly the number one.
I agree. But that's helped by lack of alternatives.
Maybe it might be helped by the fact he's a very good goalkeeper.
Yeah, but I'm not putting him down by that.
No. And Neville for Wales, of course. If you don't know the history, I mean,
he'd be widely be regarded as Wales' greatest.
Yeah.
I always used to think with Neville Southall that he wasn't great on crosses. Everton people will kill me for this. But he wasn't great on crosses, and I always used to think that he'd drop across a game if you got around him. Jordan Pickford, I've never thought of as a top goalkeeper, except every time Chelsea play Everton, he just, apart from when we beat them 6-0 last season, and Cole Palmer did he get 4, didn't he? But apart from that, I think I've seen him play so many blinders so many times. To win points, he drives me up the wall.
Did he play in John Terry's last game? Was against Sunderland, wasn't it? At Stamford Bridge, when John came off rather controversially in the 26th minute. Number 26 on his shirt.
I don't remember.
No,
I don't think he did. Someone kicked the ball out for him to come up.
Yes, I wonder.
Diego
whether
Costa told them to do. So
I wonder whether it was Jordan who did that. Yeah, we can check that out.
I don't think it was, but I don't know. I remember the person who signed him for Everton from Sunderland was the scout or the director of football, Steve Walsh, who, of course, was the director of football at Leicester when they won the league. So I think Leicester won the league in 2016. John Terry's last game 2017. So yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
I remember Steve Walsh telling me at the time, I've signed the guy who's going to be the best goalkeeper in the Premier League. He was that confident. So okay, but I'm going with Neville Southall. Just Morgan Rogers and Jack Grealish.
Yes, I want to just put people straight on Morgan Rogers. People say, well, actually, he couldn't get in the Man City team because Jack Grealish was there. That may be true, but Morgan Rogers was developed by West Bromwich Albion, and he was a signed player for Manchester City. He didn't come through the ranks there. I know that because it was either his debut or maybe his second game, a FA Cup tie, replay against Brighton. Glenn Murray won it for Brighton, coming on as a sub. And Morgan came on as a sub. and I was commentating but scouting for there was a winger called Tulloch who made his first or second game appearance in that game, and I've mentioned him now because if you look up your Shelbourne stats, he's just won the League of Ireland under Damien Duff, and he was their left winger at that time. So, but this is by the by. But Morgan Rogers recognised then as a talent. I mean, Manchester City, Middlesbrough. He's now finding somewhere, and of course, play for England now. He's now finding somewhere where he can really be the main person at an age where, you know, he's been around. What he is, early 20s, isn't he? So he's done a lot in his career, and how that fits in with Cole Palmer leaving Manchester City. Morgan Rogers didn't leave Manchester City for
Aston Villa. He went to Middlesbrough.
He went to Middlesbrough, yeah. So, but so much more to come. Jack continues to be one of the great personalities in the game. A player who fits Pep Guardiola's way of playing, whether it restricts him. He's not quite the same player that he was at Aston Villa.
No, I thought at Aston Villa, I thought he was a great Aston Villa player of that Aston Villa then. I didn't think he was a great player. I thought that he was a great talent. If you gave him the ball, and he was easily their greatest talent. So if you gave him the ball 8 times during a game, he produced something special a couple of times, and that was enough for them to survive. And it was enough for everybody to fall in love with him and for Manchester City to buy him. But it was never enough for him to get into the Manchester City team, and he had to learn to keep possession and not throw it.
Well, that's
away.
what he's very good at doing now. And I think, you know, that sort of daredevil approach that he had at Aston Villa is been coached out of him to some extent. Not his personality,
but has it been coached out of him?
him?
Does he still do it twice a game? But
Maybe.
what he doesn't do is give the ball away the
In
other
between.
6 times.
Yeah, maybe so. But he's another person who is, you know, I always say these are not robots. These are people with the same sort of look at life that we all have. Obviously, people say that it's a privileged position, but that comes with responsibilities. And Jack's he's always the same. He's still as grounded as he ever was. I might have mentioned before, I've had a couple of conversations with his dad, who goes to every game and is great support. So it's a difficult time we've almost bled Manchester City to death here today, but with Jack being now, he's going to be one of those that they're going to really push to, and he's had his fitness worries, but he's got to take on a big responsibility now. So
he was in the WhatsApp group when he was playing for Aston Villa that James Maddison was in when he was playing for Leicester. They were great mates.
Yes.
And I think
independent thinkers,
Yeah.
and a lot of football.
I think John McGinn was in that group, and
Yeah.
Ben Chilwell.
Independent thinkers, yes. Yeah. And I would say a lot of working life in football is not to be too independent. It's doing what the coach tells you and working within a group, not a WhatsApp group, within a group on the grass, as they say. But I always think that there's room for that. Graham Souness is great. I'm privileged to work with Graham for many years on television, and he always, when he was playing, and I went on a few Liverpool trips back then in those days were for television, and you went to him if you wanted to know whether something was possible or not. You didn't go to the manager, and I don't think that happens very often now. But these
Morgan Rogers.
Yes.
Is he going to be a big player?
He's got every chance to do that. I mean,
I agree.
I think he's at the right club to. It's funny because he's playing almost in Jack's position, isn't he? Really. He's got a good group around him, a great manager around him, a club on the up. But it's down to him. You know, when you think about it, he hasn't had that much experience of it. So I think the next 2 or 3 years will give you the answer to your question, and good luck to him.
So that's it. A long podcast, but we have just going to be very quick with stoppage time. The last of our segments, and I just want to bring up this season, BBC Match of the Day has got the Champions League midweek. and does it on a Wednesday night. And I watched it for the first time after the last round of games. I hadn't watched it before. What a flipping brilliant show that is. It had Mark Chapman hosting with Theo Walcott and Stephen Warnock doing the regular BBC style, match of the day style punditry. And I thought it was brilliant coverage, far superior, sorry TNT, or BT as it was then, to what they did before with their using social media to inform the debates. This was authority, experts talking about what they saw. And it's good to have Champions League on terrestrial television in such good hands, and I think it was wonderful.
Great. I have to say, and it's not because I have anything against the BBC, in fact they've just helped me out on a project that I'm doing, because I'm commentating on the Champions League, I don't get to see it really. I'm one of those characters now with the highlights are up within almost, by the time I get back home or back to my hotel, you can watch all the games on a highlight film rather than sitting and watching the analysis. But I'll take your tip, Neil, and I will, because...
Tape it.
Yeah, well,
That's
could do
what
that.
I do anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm usually taping like 3 games from the kind of games that I'm commentating.
But well done to them, because it is something that was needed, and it was done really, really well. And while we're on match of the day, Gary Lineker moving on at the end of the season, I'm going to have my say on who should be the successor.
Oh, right. This is new to me.
I want one of 3.
Have you ruled me out?
Yes. I want, but you can commentate. Get your back. One of 3. I'll take Mark Chapman because he's a top journalist presenter. I'll take Gabby Logan because she's a top presenter journalist. And I'll take Dion Dublin because he has proved he can present on non-sporting stuff. And obviously he knows his football. I think any of those 3... I do not want anybody who's got a non-presenting voice.
I just want to say how much I've enjoyed watching Gary Lineker over the years, and I wish him well.
Yeah,
it's absolutely to be at the top of one profession, which he was as a footballer, and to be at the top of a profession I know a bit more about because my career's run a little bit parallel with his. He's done a fantastic job, and I say now you watch it, you're almost like going to Goodison Park counting the games that are going to be played. So, but it's probably time for all institutions have to change at some point. I reckon I've watched 95% of the match of the day output since it started in the 1960s when I was a player, and we used to go to parties on Saturday night, but we would always find out where the telly was. Me and a couple of non-league footballers, and we'd pause the part. The telly was always put in a room where the coats were, so we have to plug it in again, and we'd watch it, and week after week after week, and that's been, what was it, 1964, 60 years, isn't it?
Yeah. David Coleman and
Kenneth Wolstenholme. Yeah,
brilliant.
And there was football on BBC before that, which I'm finding out, thanks to their kindness of their archive department, that there's something that might even appear on our podcast, courtesy of BBC in the 1950s. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so there you go. Coming up in about a week, another podcast from Martin and me.
See you next time.
Ta-ra. Don't forget, for extras, you can find things to look at on our Patreon. Don't forget that Martin's letters from the Gantry and my thoughts on life, which is football, can be read on substack.com, where it's also under the Joy of Football title. Go to substack.com and you'll find us. In fact, just be with us all week.